decides these are the key skills for auto workers that we want to see developed. Somebody in retail, somebody in hospitality, somebody in whatever, medical devices. And we have become the assessment partners of the government of India. So just like BRAC ends up partnering with the government, as I saw today out in the field in many instances, very impressively, in a small way we've partnered with the government of India on the skilling issue, on assessment of skilling issue. And that's worked brilliantly. So things like agricultural workers, so we have assessment tests for agricultural workers that blew my mind when I saw them. They are on cheap tablet computers. They don't require you to be able to read. They show you different disease pathologies visually and you can select your answer, and you can get a basic aptitude test done for agricultural knowledge. You don't need to speak any language. You just need to be able to look at a tree and a disease and a kind of thing and pick one of several pictorial options. As I said, we have voice-based tests that are best in the world now, and they're very cheap. And we have your conventional tests that you can do adaptively on. And the key insight of Aspiring Minds is that every response from every kid improves the algorithm. Because you learn much more about the ability of a particular question to delineate between good and bad, the more people take that question. And a question that's so hard that nobody can take is useless, and a question that's so easy that everybody gets is useless. And that's the intuition. And so the more people take this test, the better and better we get. And that same idea applied through all sorts of formats, pictorial, auditory. I'd love to do taste tests with it. I don't know how to do it yet, but I'm working on it. So it's available. Anybody, I'm happy to put you in touch with them. Or they have a website, aspiringminds.com. And the government one, I think, is the initiative that can really propel poor countries. So I had a very interesting meeting in Rangoon the other day, where the government said the same thing. They said, we want to find a way to take this and expand it. So I'd encourage anybody who's interested to pursue it. We had a second question. Oh yes, the business schools. Both. Lagging and leading, and that applies to my school, Harvard, as well. So, and I think that's probably a good attitude when actor working in tandem with other smart people who have chosen to contribute differently. So, I think if the business school was always led, it would be very boring, and if this was always lagged, it would be quite useless.
Other questions?
But the system runs in our country or in our things like our parents doesn't want us to be entrepreneurs, start a business as a fresh graduate. So these are what I can say. When I think to go one step ahead, I came back 2 steps down. As you mentioned the earlier time, you ensure your students that okay, you start on. If you fail, then after 1 or 2 years, I will ensure your job. So isn't it the responsibility to? I'm not blaming anyone. Isn't it the responsibility for our business schools or the universities to take such an initiative to make entrepreneurs? And no, I'm just saying that there is no one behind us to ensure that, okay, you just start, then we'll look after. If nothing happens, then we're with you. No one is ensuring us. So, whom you can suggest or what could be the possible scenario?
Yeah, I think it's I was about to point a finger at him, but I might become unpopular. So, but more seriously, I mean, I think it's a very important question because in most societies there's a risk aversion of a very deep sort. So your parents are, of course, acting in their perception of your best self-interest. I think there's 2 answers. One is you clearly don't want a perfect safety net because then you don't want everybody to be an entrepreneur. You want people who have the internal, how should I say, excitement and self-confidence and willingness to roll with the punches to try it. But that's not for everybody. I don't mean to say that everybody should be doing it. So if you provided a perfect safety net, then everybody would jump at it, and maybe that's not such a good allocation of talent either. But you do want a little bit of a safety net. Certainly you don't want it to be a social stigma or a problem of that sort. So what are possible ways to do it? I don't know that I would go so far as to say that it's the business of the business school to provide the safety net. The business of the business school is to train and impart experiences and knowledge and so on. But the government certainly could be induced or nudged in that direction. One government that has done this recently very well is Chile in South America. It has really gone out of its way to not provide a safety net so much as to lower the costs of trying an experiment. So instead of, let's say it used to cost $100 to try something, through all sorts of subsidies and grants, it's lowered that cost to, I'm making up these numbers, to say $25. So suddenly, it's a little bit more acceptable to try things like that. And when the government puts its weight behind it, there are enough numbers of people try it, then automatically it stops being a social stigma and people don't worry about their safety in numbers. So I guess I would say that the role of the schools and the role of the students is to create an awareness of that particular issue so that then the state is compelled to act on it in some way.
I would like to challenge the businesses out there, people like you, to start thinking, because you use our students. The universities that are producing these students go out to the business world. What I would like to see is the business world taking some responsibility for the education of what we produce. The business schools do not engage, the businesses do not engage. They expect, they complain, you don't do this, you don't do that. I want to see the businesses come up and say, hey, I'm putting some money, give us this. That's when you're going to get what you want. You're not going to get something when you just keep complaining about this thing. But let me have the businesses provide this individual as support. Say, you want to go out and do some entrepreneurship, go and do it. I'll back you up. I do not see the business here doing anything with education, and they expect education to give something to them. Crazy. I would like to see a business education partnership. That's when we'll see real transformation of the education system. It's not going to happen anywhere. The business schools or the educational institutions on their own cannot do it.
So keeping time constraint in mind, we'd like to take one more question. Oh, okay, we'll take two more questions. Go ahead.
A young entrepreneur without much experience, what are the green lights that you have to look out and what are the red lights? And my second part of the question is, given that Bangladeshi economy is dominated by India, how do you create entrepreneurs out of that when people here are expecting something from outside?
Green lights. The green lights are easier for me, I think. The green lights are that you just wake up in the morning and you feel like attacking a particular thing. Honestly, that really is the green light. If you're excited about it. I mean, the guy who runs Chai Point, right? He's at one level he's doing something very trivial. He's opening tea shops every day. And his other conventional career, which his parents were very happy with before he and I started this, right, was to be a high-flying executive in a major multinational, like Microsoft and EMC. And so his parents would look at me and say, "You're making my son a tea boy," right? And but now when they see what he's accomplished, right, and it's really grown extremely fast, everybody's quite happy. But the point is that he gets up and he's really excited to solve a new problem. He says, okay, I have to deal with corruption in this particular location, and I don't have a clean way to deal with corruption. That's an interesting intellectual puzzle to solve, and he goes at it for a while and tries to figure it out. Or I need to motivate my talent, and my talent is completely uneducated. He's excited to solve it. So that to me is the biggest green light. I don't know how to address the rest of your questions. Yeah.
If you don't have it, you have a red light.
If you don't have it, you have a red light. That's right. So it's a flip of it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I met the right person who will bring me back my zeal of knowledge. And I can really more than BRAC institution. is, for the interest of the students here, also others here, I must say that the leadership of BRAC is in the right hands. I must thank Saad for taking responsibility, leaving your comfort in US, come back to Bangladesh, and face the traffic that Professor Tarun has experienced in a day and a half. And I thank you for that. But my biggest thanks to you should be a secret of mine that I unveil now. Professor Tarun has forgotten his 1996 at Harvard campus days. We both of us met at Soldier Street Park and went to Professor Cash Rangan on issues, and I'm sure you listen your mind and remember many things. And when I saw the picture in the car, I thought that you must have lost 10 kgs on the day I saw you first. And I must compliment you that you were right track. That's the lighter vein of things. But first, let me take on the question of Saad Bhai has said. You rightly said that there is a disconnect between business and academia in Bangladesh. That's why we did start some projects. We have a faculty here sitting behind, Dr. Mahabub, whom I have invited to come back to Bangladesh from MIT. When I was in MIT, I said, let's go back to Bangladesh, build some small institutions. Your example of chai stall, we have done the same out of Harvard at Bangalore, Pizza Hut. So the name, that was the business plan done in, where we've done the business plan of Starbucks. It was in our time, Starbucks happened at Harvard. And I was one of the case writer at that point in time. Starbucks, I could make millions of partnerships at that point, I didn't do that. But what's important to share with you, and I'd like to shed some light on that in Bangladesh context. The biggest challenge is the risk, you rightly said, because the idea generation from execution, there is a gap in Bangladesh. Your ideas of setting up things, of course people trust you. You guy come from Microsoft, you come to this guy's stall, knowing the information and technology and getting the things network is very important, any successful ventures. But those are very difficult to connect in Bangladesh. What is important for Bangladesh is a venture capital fund. That is the missing in Bangladesh. You have many banks, 40, 50, 60 banks. But nobody thought of that. So I think those are the things Bangladesh should think about. You have brilliant minds in Bangladesh, boys are brilliant. You go to US, you see that they are wonderful things. We have boys who have done that, YouTube, one of the Bangladeshi was involved in that. So we have brilliant minds, but what I would request Saad Bhai and you, and I'm glad that you are in Bangladesh now, we see more of you in Bangladesh. We like to see this academia and business join hands and have incubators. I have done, even last week, one important project. I made my 5 executives of my security business, I gave them a seed money and told them, you pick up stocks and you buy and you invest, you tell me after 1 month what you've done on that. That is the idea, that the execution has to be helped. Ideas are many, you can have many ideas, but what I like to see from your experience, of execution you can help. However, these young minds are encouraged and get things done. And they see they have more successes than failures. But you're surprised to see, it's not a child, there are many small things our boys have done. Even I saw a guy in Singapore, a Bangladeshi left job from coming home. He set up a small stall to do those mobile phone SIM cards. I'm amazed to see him last week. I asked him, he's doing wonderfully fine. He's doing Singapore in the malls. Outside the mall, he rented a space, 5 square feet area. And he's doing wonderfully fine. So what I would request Professor Tarun to you that you please come more often to Bangladesh in India and use a brilliant mind and confidence that you give. I think that's will take a long way. I think that's what we need, leadership. And see you after 20 plus years.
You didn't, please tell us your name once more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
So this is the last 2 questions. We have a gentleman at the back and one more question.
Good evening, Dr. Khanna. Thank you for your inspiring, I think, talk. You said a number of things that I think we'll have to think about. My question is really based around the success that inspiring ideas, right? That's the name? Inspiring people? What was it?
Aspiring minds.
Aspiring minds.
Yes.
This connect between skills and industry needs, which is something you seem to have been able to address through that organization. Could you tell us a little bit more about how precisely that's been done and how it can be perhaps replicated in terms of the needs that we have here? Because that is, of course, the problem. one major problem is the mismatch. The other very fundamental problem is apart from poor governance and corruption and all that, is the issue of plain access for the poor, access for the underprivileged, access for people who don't have the right connections, the right kinds of money to get into any kind of employment, entrepreneurship. How do you address that? Any thoughts on that? Thank you.
It's a model that we started in India, and we're not, India is pretty messed up. The market for talent, so there's plenty for us to do there over the next 10 years. But there have been plenty of entrepreneurs in other countries who licensed technology and begun to use it in their own setting, and that's wonderful to see. But one thing I would say is there are lots of problems in the talent ecosystem that we do not address, and I think you brought up some of them. If you really are at the very bottom and you have no ability to train yourself at all, then you probably wouldn't even fall into our net in the first instance, unless you take one of our tests to be a plantation worker or do some very bottom-end vocational skilling, which is really the piece that I'm actually most excited about for developing countries, because that's where most of the jobs will be created, your basic trades and skilling. And when we went again today to the different sites that we were traveling around, there was a government official who was talking about trades. The government, even in Bangladesh, has many programs to train people, but there's no standards put in place to assess. And without measurement and assessment in anything, it's very hard to make progress. So that's really the void that we're trying to fill, to provide some credible, reproducible, scientifically valid assessment on dimensions that a group of people can agree on. And it doesn't matter what the vocation is. But I'd invite you to engage with that group of people and contribute to it, and free ride on it, borrow it, whatever. That's great. I hope it gets used. Great deal.
We'll take just one more question because Professor Tarun has a very early morning flight, so we don't want to detain him for too long. So just if there's one more question.
Again, very basic. It's at the basic level. We see entrepreneurship kicking off. It's kicked off in the last 2 years. The youth, people like us, students, and those who have recently graduated, they've taken up entrepreneurial missions, if you will say. So what we see is that they kick off. They have very, very bright starts, but they're not sustainable. They're not long term. For example, Tea Point, or Chai Point. If it came to Bangladesh, I believe it would be really fancy. It would be the talk of the town for 2 months, and then some guy would come up with something maybe like Coffee Point, and then there it becomes the talk of the town, and people would forget about Chai Point. So my question is, how do you ensure sustainability long term of business like this? Do you go into an industry that has less competition or less of new entrants, or do you come up with a different strategy?
I don't have any silver bullet. When we launched Chai Point, and if you saw the pictures of the first shop and the pictures of the ones that we're opening today, at some level, other than the color of the brand and so on, and a few consistent things, a lot has changed, and it keeps changing. And that's just trying to stay one step ahead of the competition. So I don't, when you say that in Bangladesh people give up, I don't know if that has anything to do with Bangladesh. It just means that the people who are engaged in these are either not finding the things that really excite them to make them keep working on them, or they're not, helped along by their friends and peers and institutions to stick with it. But there's no other solution than just getting up and going at it again and again. And I think it has absolutely nothing to do with Bangladesh or anything.
No, so more than giving up, it's more like the market acceptance. It goes down for
the market acceptance is a function of how good you are. I'm sorry. If you're not good, then you deserve to be bypassed by the next guy.
Exactly, and I think anything, whether it's a university, whether it's a business, everything is a work in progress.
Yeah.
There's no end to it. So whether you fit in the needs of the markets or not, the day you don't fit, you're out. That's it.
So it's being dynamic as much as you can.
Just keep working at it. That's the answer.
Thank you, Ghazi Habib. Habib happens to be one of our students who participated in the Hulk competition in Shanghai. So he's well, a student entrepreneur. So, thank you, Tarun Khanna. Now I have request Professor Saad Andaleeb to give a vote of thanks and a summation of today's program.
I'll keep it very brief because I think there's been a great deal of exchange here. And I took some notes, but I don't know where to start, where to end. I think the beginning point of all of this is, as Professor Khanna is addressing the whole idea of entrepreneurship, I think as far as I'm concerned, it looks like what you want to do is something that should basically come from your heart. You want to succeed, you want to be passionate about it. You cannot just go up out there and say, I want to do this or that. You must be sure of what you want to do, and you must be passionate about it. That's the one thing, and then solve it and keep working it. I don't think you need to do anything more than that. Take a problem, solve it, keep working it. That's how you basically build your business. Now, I do have some observations in terms of building these entrepreneurial systems in the context of Bangladesh. I think one of you did mention that, but my parents don't want me to do this. So there's a huge cultural issue, and I don't think that we are in that stage where we can say that we are ready to be entrepreneurs like we see in other parts of the world. So our entrepreneurship has to be defined by our context and not by the context of other worlds. And I think that we need to take that a little bit into consideration. The other thing I think is about this lead and lag thing that you mentioned, because I think it's a terrific point, and I think we really have to delve deeply into it. And I really would like to re-emphasize what I just said. The lead and lag should come in a cooperative way, which the businesses and the universities, they have. The government will always be there. They have a role. Their role is more monitoring and supervision. The creative energy comes from the institutions